Today we are going to be talking about the payroll year end and what you can do, what you need to know going into payroll period end processing and doing your W-2s and ACA reporting and things that you can do to help yourself prepare for this in advance. And hopefully we'll answer most of the questions that you may already have. I'm certain this is going to be a review for some of you. And for those that have not been around Sage 100 payroll for a long period of time, if you hear me refer to old payroll and new payroll, the payroll module changed in version 2018. So we have some folks that have been around for a few cycles of the sun that remember the old way, and so sometimes I do make reference to those. So if I say new payroll, I'm talking about the current versions of payroll since 2018. So our agenda today is to talk about what is required to process the W-2s, electronic filing thresholds because they did change this year, Atrix and which forms are needed, some reconciliation information and tips, and of course, frequently asked questions. So the first thing that everyone needs to know is what is going to be required to process W-2s from Sage 100 or from Sage 100 Cloud. You absolutely have to be current on your software maintenance plan with Sage. You have to have an active internet connection. And new for this year, compatibility for Atrix. You have to be on Sage 100 version 2020, which is 6.20 or newer in order to be able to use the Atrix software to process your W-2s. So that's new for this year. Make sure you're on version 2020 or newer. On the Sage 100 side, you also need to have payroll version 2.24 installed. Usually that's released sometime between December 15th and 20th. I haven't received a specific date on that yet, but that should be forthcoming here pretty soon. They will release that, and that's going to be a requirement. So payroll 2.24, what does that entail? That updates the Sage 100 program and prepares it for the routing of the data to currently move over into the Atrix forms. So it's pretty important for that. And it also contains some code changes, for how it processes data for your payroll. These things would be not included in versions 2.23 and prior. So definitely want to stay up to date on your payroll to make sure that everything is mapped accordingly and that your payroll processes as it should to be in compliance with new standards for the new year. If you are unable to install payroll 2.24, we do have some folks that have certain payroll enhancements that may not be yet compatible with 2.24. We do advise that you go through a thorough reconciliation and testing process to make sure that your data is going over into Atrix accurately, because we can't guarantee that it will or that it won't, but we recommend that if you can't have 2.24 installed, then you should make sure that you go through a reconciliation process to make sure that the data is in fact correct. If you find that there are things that may need to be correct, you can manually correct those in Atrix once you know what you need to correct. That can be done in the Atrix grid. And in order to install Payroll 2.24, you also have to be running Sage 100 version 2020 or newer in order for that to install. So that pretty much is the version that you need to have is 2020 or newer in order to do Atrix and in order to install this payroll update that you need. And as always, we do recommend that you contact our offices for assistance with the updates. We want to make sure any of your customizations and enhancements are safe and continue to work once the updates are installed. So just reach out to us. We definitely want to make sure that this install is as seamless as possible for you. We don't want you to lose any customization or enhancement capabilities from the installation. So in addition to the Payroll 2.24 installation, there is also your payroll tax updates that come out. Usually those come out once a month. Those are the ones where you get prompted for it. In your Sage 100, it tells you, hey, you've got an update. Do you want to download and install it? There will be a new one for that as well. Generally, that's released between December 15th and 20th. And so when that pops up, you definitely want to make sure that that is installed. That should be anytime during the year. Whenever you get that pop up, you should make sure that that gets installed as soon as possible, because that does include tax information that is updated with percentages, tax groups, and things like that. Thresholds. Definitely want to make sure that you are up to date on your thresholds for the new year. So make sure that when you are prompted for those, that you do install those as soon as you can. In order to do that, you do have to have role permissions in Sage 100 for that to install. But as long as you do that, as long as you have that proper permission, and as long as there's no payroll entry in progress in any company, because remember, this is a global update for your Sage. So no payroll being processed in any company, you should go ahead and install it when prompted. If you're not able to do it at that time, you can go back and manually request the update by going to the payroll module under utilities. There is the payroll tax update there. So if you can't install it when the pop-up comes up, maybe someone is in the middle of payroll, or something else is going on that would prevent you from doing that at that time, you can go back and manually request that update. And of course, once you do the update, make sure that you go back and review the tax update report. That is found under the payroll utilities as well, so that you can see what has been updated and if it's going to impact you for any reason. While you are processing your W-2s, Atrix e-filing and reporting software has to be installed on your workstation, or any users who are going to be doing any of the processing for W-2s in Affordable Care Act. And in order for Atrix to push down updates for their forms, because they do process around 330 government entities, 330 filings for government entities, and they have to have their forms updated and approved by those entities. So they will push the updates to your workstation, and in order to load that, you do have to have sufficient Windows permissions for that. So you may need to enlist your IT support person to help you with downloads from Atrix if it prompts you that, hey, you need to install an update. But if Atrix prompts you that it needs to install an update, you do need to go ahead and install that so that you have the most up-to-date forms. And in conjunction with Sage 100, their forms usually release around December 15th to the 20th for the federal forms. And then throughout the month of January, you will see updates. I work with year-end processing throughout the month of January, and it seems like just about every day there's an update, but I don't think it's quite that extensive. But whenever they receive an update on their forms, they will push out those forms to the users at that time. So frequent updates during the month of January. So new for this year, the electronic filing thresholds have changed for the federal government. Previously, I can't remember, it was fairly high, but this year for federal government, you have to electronically file your returns with the federal government if you have 10 or more informational returns. So if you are filing more than 10 W-2s, there you go. You're going to have to e-file this year. If you are filing less than 10, uh, you have to also include the count of informational returns that you file for other filings as well, including the 1099s or the 1094s and 1095s. So depending on the number that you may have in those as well, you still may be over the 10 informational return limit. I have included here on the slide what the regulations say and where to find them, but it just is 10 is your limit. So if you are going to have more than that, you do have to e-file. On the Kentucky side, it's unchanged from last year. It's 26 or more withholding statements, and that is across W-2 and 1099 series. So if you have more than 26, you have to e-file for Kentucky. Other states, I'm not sure about the other states' requirements. So if you have other states you're filing in, you should check with your CPA or state agency to see what the filing requirements are for your state. So moving on to reconciliation tips. We do recommend that you go through a reconciliation process before filing your W-2s, just to make sure that your data is correct. I usually recommend that you go through kind of a pre-test in early December to see if there are going to be any variances that you might need to address. And that means you would have an extra payroll in December to kind of get through any adjustments that may need to be made if you find something that has not been processed correctly. So as part of the reconciliation, we do recommend that you go through and run a few reports and do some tie outs, and then run your Atrix test drive mode so that you can compare what you've calculated to what's showing up in Atrix. So the first step is to generate your quarterly tax report. So that's found under your payroll module under reports and then the quarterly tax report. So go ahead and run that for your fourth quarter so that you can get your year-to-date gross wage information. Secondly, generate your deduction reports to get the values of your deductions that have reduced taxable wages. So in most cases, that's going to be your cafeteria plan deductions and certain pension plan deductions that might reduce your taxable wages. So the deduction reports are found under the payroll module, under the report section, and then the deduction report, and you will have to put in the deduction codes so that you can run those reports and get those values. Once you have those two reports, then you can calculate your subject wages. So gross wages less the pre-tax deductions is going to get your subject wages. And then take the Atrix test drive to verify amounts generated in the grid match your calculated values. So when you generate your Atrix grid, you typically have the option of generating the test drive for the first 25 recipients or for all of your recipients. So if you've got more than 25, you'll want to generate for all. But the test drive mode, keep in mind, does not save any data, and it's really just there for you to get your feet wet and see the information and go through testing so that you can refamiliarize yourself with that process. So again, gross wages are reduced by pre-tax deductions, generally cafeteria and certain pension deductions. If a tax rule that reduced taxable wages was used, what that means is when you set up your pre-tax deductions on cafeteria plans and pension plans, you have to select a tax rule. If your tax rule is one that reduces wages, then you should see that once you run your reports, you should see that the taxable wages did get reduced by those deductions. So again, subject wages are the wages that are subject to the tax, and gross wages less pre-tax are your subject wages. Now, keeping in mind that on the federal wages, your subject wages are reduced by cafeteria plans and certain pension plan deductions. And when I say certain pension plan deductions, keep in mind Roth IRAs are not pre-tax, so they would not reduce the taxable wages on federal. Now, on Social Security and Medicare, it's slightly different. They are only reduced by certain pension plan deductions. They are not reduced by cafeteria plans. So if you're going through your reconciliation process and you're reconciling everything on Social Security and Medicare, they are only reduced by those certain pension plan deductions, not cafeteria plan deductions. And state wages are often reduced by cafeteria plan and certain pension plan deductions, but that can vary state by state. So you definitely want to check with your state to make sure you have the right calculation for subject wages. Now, what happens if you do your calculations and you run your matrix grid and you do see a variance? Why would there be a variance? So there are 3 reasons that I found that might cause a variance in your calculations here. The first one is if the tax rule you selected did not reduce the wages as expected, or if the tax rule on the deduction was changed sometime during the year. So you could have maybe had a rule that did not reduce taxable wages and then change the rule sometime mid-year to correct that. So you may have a correction during the year that you would still have that variance from the earlier part of the year when it was not when the tax rule was not correct. So the tax rules are very, very important. And if you don't have the right tax rules selected, or if there's a change sometime mid-year, that can cause the variance in the calculation that Atrix sees. Also, if you have had a payroll check reversal in the middle of the year, if the person doing the reversal used the old manual reversal method, and this is again while I'm talking about the old payroll version, if you use the old payroll version to reverse a check, that we have found has caused problems with the way it sends the data over to Atrix. So that could cause an issue. You should, under the new payroll versions, be using the one-click reversal button where it fills in all the negative amounts for you, because there is some programming on that one-click reversal that makes sure that the subject wages are correct going forward. Also, it could be that if you had any payroll checks that were set to have manual taxes, if you had incorrectly entered subject wages on a manual tax calculated check, you could have a variance from that. So those are the 3 ways that I've seen variances happen from your calculations in Sage to what Atrix has when you have generated your grid. So again, we do recommend you calculate also not just on the federal side on the wages and withholdings, but also look at your Social Security and Medicare and local taxes to compare those withholding results as well. Just keeping in mind that for this year, Social Security is 6.2%, and the wage-based limit for 2023 is 160,200. And on the Medicare, you get the 1.45% with the extra 0.9% in for wages in excess of 200,000. So just keep in mind those calculations there. And the reason why I say it is important to go ahead and look at those calculations is because Atrix does give a warning when you're processing through your W-2 grid that if what you show in your grid is if it differs or if it varies more than $1 from what the program calculates it should be, then it's going to give you a warning for that. So if you do those calculations and you see at some point you did have a variance, and depending on how significant it is, you may want to make an adjustment in your payroll for the final payroll of the year to make sure that you get that ironed out so that it doesn't cause you an issue when you're processing your W-2s. So again, if you do this prior to the last payroll of the year, it will give you the opportunity to adjust for the over or under. And a reminder, don't forget if you've got non-cash fringe benefits, don't forget to record those before the end of the year as well. So talking about other tips, one of the things that I recommend that folks do is to review the years that you have Sage set to retain your payroll history. In the old payroll prior to version 2018, we would make the company copies and you would just have those as your payroll history. Then with the newer payroll, we don't have to do that anymore. The tables, the data is stored in the tables until it reaches its years to retain the payroll history. Until it reaches that age, the data stays there. So we do recommend that you check before you do your year-end processing. Double check what your setting is set to make sure that you are in fact retaining the number of years that you want to retain. And you definitely want to look at this setting before doing year-end processing instead of after. So to find that, you find it under the payroll module under setup and payroll options. And tab 6 has the history settings. At the bottom, you see highlighted there years to retain payroll history. You can set that accordingly to what you need. I think the minimum is 2 years, but most people usually prefer to have at least 5 to 7. And then while you're there also, I would just eyeball and double check your settings in the section just above that for your tracking your changes to your payroll. So I would make sure that that is set to all so that you are tracking changes in Sage for that. All right, the next question that we get often is, do I need to run my W-2s before I run period end processing? So there is, the answer to that is no. You don't have to run your W-2s before you run period end processing. The data tables are now structured in a way that it stores that data year over year per the number of years of history you're maintaining. So it doesn't get overwritten by period end processing unless the records age out beyond the amount of years that you're retaining your history. So that's why it's, again, important to make sure you have the right number of years history that you're maintaining. So no quick, no rush to get your W-2s done before you do period end processing. So for those of you that have been around a while and we're used to making the historical company copy each year for your history and still like to do that in your the new payroll, there's nothing wrong with that. But the question is, if you make your company copy, should you process your W-2s in the live company or in the copy? And the answer to that is your e-filing forms, including W-2s, should be processed in your live company. And the reason for that is when you e-file forms, it does save files in the directory for that company. So in order to keep all your data and all your archives together, you would want them all to be in your live company so that if you have a correction to make, we know exactly where to go to make that correction instead of having to say, oh, well, which one did you process in and have to hunt it down. If you do it all in the live company, then we always know that's where your data was processed, and we would know that's where we go to make the corrections if you have some after the fact. Can you run payroll for January 2020 2024 before running period end processing for payroll year 2023. Well, that's kind of a mixed answer here. So we've got what is best practice and what is possible. So best practice says, yes, you should complete all your final postings to payroll 3 and do period and processing before you do anything for 2024. However, we know that's not always, you're not always able to do that for various reasons. Obviously, for weekly payrolls and with the holidays and all the complexities that go into reconciling, um, it's not possible to do that. So the answer is yes, it is possible to run payroll in the new year before running your period in processing 2023. Um, you do have to have role maintenance security to be able to do that, but it is possible. If you have to do that, the just be aware that time off accrual calculations and deduction goals, for example, don't get reset and aren't going to be reflected accurately on the first pay stub when you do that. It will, you know, uh, fix itself once you do your period in processing. But if you have elected to defer that processing, just know that your pay stubs that first time around may not have correct data for accrual time off accruals and deductions. The question is, do you have to e-file in order to use Atrix? And the answer to that is no. You can still print forms for free all day long in Atrix, but if you choose to or are required to, and I think probably the majority of us now will be required to e-file, you do have to register with Atrix, and they do charge a processing fee to utilize their software and to do their processing. If you haven't already enrolled with Atrix to be able to do so, you can enroll with them at efile.atrix.com. It is a pretty quick and simple process to get registered with them so that you can generate e-filings. And the question we often get is, well, how much does filing with them cost? If you want to see the current fee schedule, the link here is partner.atrix.com, sage-100-ERP, and then filing options. Their pricing schedule typically is per informational item that you are processing. They do have a minimum, I think, $24.95 fee for a file. So just based on the number of recipients that you're going to have, that's usually how it's calculated. In the past, they've had bundled options. I can't remember if I saw them on the web page there on the link. I can't recall if I saw the bundled options there. So if it's something you're interested in pursuing, I would just reach out to their customer service and see about bundled options. So for those that may want to print and distribute their forms, I am going to throw out there, especially if you're at the threshold where you now have to e-file, you can choose to just e-file with them and print and mail your own. But we have had quite a few of our clients say that it's actually more cost effective for them to do full service with Atrix, where Atrix print and mails the forms for you to the recipients and does the e-filing. So you may want to check out and do a cost analysis to see if that actually would help you as well. But if you will be printing the forms yourself, they do have to be in the blank perforated format. Atrix does not print to the classic pre-printed two-part W-2 format forms. So you do have to have the blank perforated format for processing forms in Atrix. So again, forms blank perforated format. The IRS does require that employees receive copies that can be separated, easily separated. I've listed the regulations there. Where do you get the forms? Sage checks and forms offers the forms uh, in the blank 4-up format. They offer bundles, including the envelopes and such. You can get them from sagechecks.com. However, you are not required to purchase from Sage. If you have a provider that has those forms in that format, you may purchase from any provider that has that format. But if you want to get them from Sage, Sage Checks, I have included the item. The item number LW2BK4DWS is the bundle. And that bundle includes the blank perforated 4-up forms and the pre-printed instructions on the back and the envelopes. So let's talk a little bit about the W-2 and the W-3 forms. And when you go through the Atrix grid and you're going through the verification process and generating printouts, the employee W-2 copy has to be on the blank 4-up perforated paper with the notice on the back. The federal W-2 and W-3 copies cannot be on perforated paper, so those need to be printed to plain paper. The state copy, Atrix will prompt you to print on your blank 4-part perforated paper, but some state agencies don't require the perforated paper, so you may be able to print that on plain paper. You would just need to know your state's filing requirements and what they will accept. And then, of course, your copy can be printed to plain paper as well. So essentially, the recipient copies must be on the perforated with the notice, and then typically most of the other copies can be printed to blank paper. So for those that are doing Affordable Care Act, on the 1095s, there also is the forms with the pre-printed instructions on the back, and if you want to get that from Sage Checks and Forms, here are the item numbers for those. Typically on that, I just search the phrase 1095 blank, and there two options typically show up. One is the B forms and one is the C forms. Just make sure you get the correct forms for the form that your company processes. And I just wanted to throw out a note also is that Atrix has designed their 1094 and 5 forms so that the name and address fields will show up in the same place as the W-2 fields, so that you can use the same envelopes that you use for your W-2s. So if you are looking to reduce cost and you're printing them on your own, just know that the W-2 envelopes for the 4-up format forms will work also with the 1094s and 1095s. Year-end assistance. So we'd love to help you with your year-end and make sure that that you are successful and answer any questions that you have about processing for year-end. But we do that based on scheduled appointment only. So if you need help or you think you're going to need help, go ahead and schedule your appointment now. Because if you wait until January, you will end up getting best of the rest options. And we do our assistance based on appointment only. Our holiday schedule for the Christmas and New Year's holiday is that Monday, December 25th is our offices will be closed for Christmas, and January 1st in observance of New Year. In the chat, there should be a link for the if you need to request assistance or an appointment for assistance. In the chat, there should be a link to complete the online request to do so. And if you have additional, well, let's just say if you've got questions now that you want to have answered in the Q&A on Zoom, you can put your questions there in the Q&A bar, and I'll try to address those now. But if you have additional questions after this webinar, you can send that to tech support at oasisky.com, and we will be happy to circle up with you and answer those questions in a one-on-one basis if you need. So at this point, if you have any questions, you can put them in the Q&A link there, and I will be happy to answer those. Okay, so the question is, can we get a copy of the recording? And the answer is yes, we can have the recording to this webinar sent out to you. Good question. I'll leave it open for another minute or two for additional questions. All right, well, thank you again for spending some time with us. And if you think of any additional questions, please be sure and reach out to tech support at oasisky.com, and we'll be glad to circle up with you. And also, if you need to schedule a session for assistance during your processing, please use the link in the chat, and we would be glad to set up an appointment for you for that. Thanks again for attending, and hope you guys have a great rest of the year.